She walked into the police station with tears in her eyes, saying her husband was missing, that he'd left after an argument, that she was worried sick. But what she didn't tell them was that she'd already confessed to her lover. Confessed that she'd shot her husband in the head while he slept, that she'd wrapped his body in a rooftop storage container and buried him in a shallow grave. And by the time police realized what really happened, she'd already ordered a new mattress. This is the story of Jennifer Gledhill and Matthew Johnson, a military family living in $1 million home in Utah. 3 beautiful children, a husband serving his country in special operations, a wife who seemed to have it all. But behind the perfect facade was a marriage falling apart, an affair that spiraled out of control, and a night that would end with a gunshot, a grave, and a secret that couldn't stay buried. Because by September 24, 2024, when Jennifer walked into that police station to report her husband missing, he'd already been dead for 3 days, and the only person who knew the truth was the man she'd been sleeping with. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Whether you're in the States, the UK, or anywhere else in the world, we'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, subscribe to The Only Witness so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Matthew Johnson was 51 years old when he disappeared. A member of the Utah National Guard, part of a special operations unit. The kind of man who'd served multiple combat tours overseas. Disciplined, dedicated. The kind of father who never missed his kids' school events, who coached Little League, who was always there. Matthew and Jennifer had been married for over a decade. They had 3 children together, 11, 7, and 5 years old. From the outside, they looked like the all-American family. A beautiful home in Cottonwood Heights, a suburb just outside Salt Lake City. The house was worth nearly $1 million. Neat lawn, 2 cars in the driveway, the kind of neighborhood where people know each other's names and wave when they pass. But behind closed doors, the Johnson marriage was crumbling. And by July of 2024, Jennifer had had enough. She filed for divorce. Court documents would later describe their relationship as highly dysfunctional, both parties bringing out the worst in each other. Neighbors had heard them arguing, loud voices carrying through the windows late at night. Police had been called to the house before for what they termed civil matters. Nothing violent, just tension. The kind that builds and builds until something has to give. In August, just a month after filing for divorce, Jennifer took things a step further. She filed for a temporary protective order against Matthew. She claimed she was afraid of him, that he'd been violent, that she needed protection. She even submitted video evidence, footage of arguments between them, text messages, proof, she said, that she was in danger. But when the case went before Commissioner Russell Minus, he saw something different. He watched the videos Jennifer had submitted, and what he saw wasn't a terrified woman. What he saw was someone who appeared unafraid, someone who was equally confrontational. The text messages Jennifer sent to Matthew were, in the commissioner's words, repeatedly berating, belittling, and demeaning, if not outright attempting to goad him into a violent response. On September 16, 2024, Commissioner Minus dismissed the protective order. He wrote in his ruling that the request appeared to be a litigation tactic in the pending divorce, not a genuine fear for safety. He went on to say that the couple's behavior over the past several months was clearly suggestive that an action for divorce should have been filed long before reaching the current state of affairs. 4 days later, Matthew Johnson would be dead. And Jennifer, she'd already moved on, because while she was fighting Matthew in court, while she was texting him cruel messages and recording their arguments, she was also sleeping with someone else. His name hasn't been publicly released. Court documents refer to him only as the confidential informant, but we know this. He was having an extramarital affair with Jennifer Gledhill. They'd been seeing each other for weeks, maybe months. And on September 19, 2024, Jennifer showed him something. A gun. Loaded. She showed him Matthew's handgun. The informant would later tell police that Jennifer seemed calm, almost casual about it, like she was showing him a new purse, not a weapon. On September 20th, Matthew came home from his National Guard duties. It was a Friday night. The kids were in the house. And according to what Jennifer would later tell the informant, Matthew confronted her. He knew. He knew she'd been cheating, and he was furious. Neighbors heard them arguing that night, loud voices, shouting, the kind of fight that makes you close your windows and turn up the TV. One neighbor would later tell police he saw Matthew at a gas station near their home late that evening. He looked exhausted, defeated. That was the last time anyone other than Jennifer saw Matthew Johnson alive. What happened next, Jennifer would describe in chilling detail to her lover. According to her confession to the informant, Matthew came home drunk that night. They fought. He yelled at her for the affair. She yelled back. And then, exhausted, Matthew went to bed. He fell asleep on the mattress in their master bedroom, and while he slept, Jennifer got the gun. The same gun she'd shown her lover the day before. She walked into the bedroom, stood over her husband, the father of her 3 children, the man she'd been married to for over a decade, and she shot him in the head. Matthew Johnson died in his sleep. He never knew it was coming. And when it was over, when the room was silent except for the ringing in Jennifer's ears, she realized what she'd done, and she panicked, not because she felt remorse, but because she needed to cover it up. She needed to make this go away. So, she got to work. Jennifer told the informant that she grabbed a rooftop storage container, the kind you strap to the top of your car for road trips. She dragged Matthew's body off the bed and somehow, despite the weight, managed to get him into the container. Then she slid it down the stairs. Can you imagine that? The sound of a plastic container bumping down each step, the weight of a full-grown man inside, the terror that one of the kids might wake up. But they didn't. Or if they did, they stayed quiet. Jennifer loaded the container into the back of their minivan. And then, in the early morning hours of September 21st, she drove north. She drove from Cottonwood Heights toward Kaysville, a town about 30 miles away. She found a spot, remote, quiet, and she dug a hole, a shallow grave. She buried her husband somewhere in the wilderness of Davis County. And then she drove home. But she wasn't done. Not even close. Because now she had to erase the evidence. She had to make sure no one would ever know what happened in that bedroom. When Jennifer got home, she went to work. She cleaned. Obsessively. She bleached the walls. She scrubbed the carpet. She cleaned the bed frame, the blinds, every surface she could think of. But there was too much blood. The mattress was soaked. The carpet beneath it stained. So she did what any murderer trying to cover their tracks would do. She ordered a new mattress. On September 24th, just 3 days after killing Matthew, Jennifer went online and ordered a brand new mattress. It arrived 2 days later. She had her mother, Rosalie, help her move it into the house. Rosalie would later claim she had no idea what had happened, that she thought she was just helping her daughter with a simple home purchase. But investigators wouldn't believe that, because by the time police started digging, they'd find evidence that Jennifer's parents knew a lot more than they were letting on. But we'll get to that. Because on September 22nd, the day after the murder, Jennifer did something that would ultimately lead to her arrest. She went to see her lover, the man she'd been having an affair with. And she told him everything. Imagine being that man. You've been sleeping with a married woman, you know she's going through a divorce, you know things are messy. But then she shows up at your house, bruises all over her body, and she tells you, I killed him. I shot Matthew in the head while he slept. I buried him. It's done. The informant would later tell police that he was terrified, that he didn't know what to say, that Jennifer seemed calm, too calm. She even made a joke. She told him that if he'd told her a story like this, she would have said, "Let me get my shovel," meaning she would have helped, that she would have covered for him. She expected the same loyalty from him. But the informant didn't laugh. He just stared at her, trying to process what he'd just heard. Jennifer noticed the bruises on her arms, her legs. When he asked about them, she said they were from moving Matthew's body, from sliding the storage container down the stairs. From cleaning, she wasn't crying, wasn't breaking down, she was just explaining, like she was describing how she rearranged furniture. The informant recorded part of their conversation. In the recording, which would later be played in court, Jennifer apologizes. She says, "I'm sorry for telling you. I shouldn't have put this on you." The informant responds, "I don't know what to say. I'm scared." And Jennifer says, "Don't think of me as a monster. He wasn't a person anymore. He wasn't Matt anymore. Those words, he wasn't a person anymore. That's what haunted the informant. the way she dehumanized her own husband, the father of her children. And that's when he made a decision. He was going to the police, but he didn't go right away. He waited. For days, he carried this secret, unsure of what to do. And on September 23rd, 2024, Matthew Johnson was reported missing. Not by Jennifer, by the Utah National Guard, because Matthew didn't show up to work. And for a man like Matthew, a special operations soldier with years of service, that was unheard of. His commanders were worried. They called around. No one had heard from him. His phone went straight to voicemail. His truck was missing. So they contacted the Cottonwood Heights Police Department. And that's when the investigation began. Except, at that point, police didn't know they were investigating a murder. They thought they were looking for a missing person. And on September 24th, Jennifer Gledhill walked into the police station to file a missing persons report. She told police that she and Matthew had gotten into an argument on September 20th, that he'd told her he was leaving, that he needed space, that he'd be gone for a week and she shouldn't try to contact him. She said she hadn't heard from him since. She seemed worried, concerned, the kind of wife who just wanted her husband to come home safely. But police were already suspicious, because they'd done their homework. They knew about the divorce, they knew about the protective order that had just been dismissed, they knew this was a volatile situation. So they started digging. And on September 28th, 4 days after Jennifer filed the missing persons report, they got a call from the confidential informant, the man Jennifer had confessed to, and everything changed. The informant told police everything. He played them the recording. He showed them text messages where Jennifer lamented that he wasn't more supportive, where she said she thought he'd be the kind of friend who would help her hide a body, not turn her in. Police moved fast. They obtained a search warrant for the Johnson home, and when they entered that master bedroom, they found exactly what the informant had described: a new mattress, still in its plastic wrapping. But underneath, beneath the bed, soaked into the carpet, was a massive bloodstain. Testing would later confirm it was human blood, male. And while they waited for DNA confirmation, they also found blood on the bed frame, on the slats that held the mattress, reddish-brown spots on the walls, on the blinds, evidence of a cleanup, bleach residue, carpet cleaning chemicals. It was clear. Someone had tried desperately to erase what happened in that room. But you can't erase blood, not completely, and you can't erase a confession. On October 2nd, 2024, Jennifer Gledhill was arrested. She was charged with murder and obstruction of justice. And when police took her into custody, she didn't say a word, didn't ask for a lawyer, didn't cry, she just went quietly. But the case was far from over, because Matthew's body was still missing. And without a body, the prosecution knew they had an uphill battle. Police searched everywhere. They used the GPS data from Jennifer's phone to track her movements on the morning of September 21st. The data showed she'd left Cottonwood Heights around 6 a.m. She drove to a nearby neighborhood where Matthew's truck was later found, then she headed north, toward Kaysville. Her phone stayed on until about 2:37 p.m. Then it went dark, turned off. When it came back on around 5 p.m., she was driving eastbound on the West Davis corridor. Later that evening, surveillance footage captured Jennifer at a car wash on Highland Drive. She spent over an hour there, cleaning the minivan, obsessively. She opened all the doors, scrubbed every inch. The kind of cleaning that doesn't make sense unless you're trying to hide something. Detectives focused their search on Davis County, Farmington Bay, wetlands near the Legacy Parkway. They brought in search teams, drones, cadaver dogs. They combed through miles of terrain. And then, after a storm, they found something. A rooftop storage container, floating in the wetlands. It had traces of blood inside. Matthew's blood. DNA confirmed it. Prosecutors believed the container had been concealed somewhere in the area, but when the storm came, the water rose, and the container floated away from wherever Jennifer had hidden it. It was a break in the case. Proof that Matthew's body had been in that container, proof that Jennifer's confession was true. But the body itself, still missing. To this day, Matthew Johnson has not been found. On October 15th, 2024, Jennifer Gledhill was formally indicted. 9 felony charges: first-degree murder, 5 counts of obstruction of justice, possession with intent to distribute a controlled substance. That charge came after police found drugs in the home during their search, desecration of a human body, and witness tampering. Because after her arrest, Jennifer tried to reach out to the informant, tried to convince him not to testify, tried to control the narrative, but it was too late. The informant had already told police everything, and he wasn't backing down. Jennifer pleaded not guilty to all charges. Her defense attorney, Jeremy Deuce, argued that the case was entirely circumstantial, that without a body, without a murder weapon, the prosecution couldn't prove Jennifer had killed Matthew. He even suggested that Matthew, as a highly trained special operations soldier, could have disappeared on his own, that he had the skills to vanish if he wanted to, that maybe he was still alive. But prosecutors weren't buying it. They had the blood evidence, they had the confession, they had the GPS data, they had the storage container, and they had the testimony of a man who had no reason to lie, a man who had everything to lose by coming forward. Because by admitting he'd had an affair with Jennifer, he was opening himself up to public scrutiny, to judgment. But he did it anyway, because he knew it was the right thing to do. But Jennifer wasn't the only one arrested. On October 24th, 2024, Jennifer's parents, Thomas and Rosalie Gledhill, were taken into custody. Both were charged with 4 counts of obstruction of justice. Police believed they'd helped Jennifer cover up the crime. Witnesses reported seeing Thomas and Rosalie at Jennifer's house for over 5 hours on the day after the murder. They claimed they were just visiting, just spending time with their daughter. But investigators didn't believe that, because during the search of the home, police found that the new mattress had been purchased by Rosalie, her credit card, her name on the receipt. And when police searched the Gledhill parents' home, they found a plastic tote in the bedroom where Jennifer had been staying. Inside, cleaning supplies, bleach, carpet shampoo, the same products used at the crime scene. Thomas and Rosalie denied everything. They said they had no idea what Jennifer had done, that they were just being supportive parents. But the evidence suggested otherwise. And in November, they were formally charged. As of now, their case is still pending. But the fact that Jennifer's own parents potentially helped her cover up a murder, that added a whole new layer of horror to an already horrific case. On October 25th, 2024, Jennifer appeared in court for the first time since her indictment. The courtroom was packed. Media, curious onlookers, Matthew's family and friends, and Jennifer's 3 children. Now, on October 25th, 2024, Jennifer appeared in court for the first time since her indictment. The courtroom was packed. Media, curious onlookers, Matthew's family and friends, and Jennifer's 3 children, now in the custody of Matthew's relatives, were the subject of a heated legal battle. The judge, Todd Olson, issued a no-contact order. Jennifer was not allowed to see her children, not allowed to call them, not allowed to send letters. Nothing. Jennifer cried during the hearing. Her attorney argued that the order was unnecessary, that even if she had contact with the kids, it would be supervised, that there was no reason to keep a mother from her children, but the prosecution argued that the children could become victims in the case, that Jennifer might try to manipulate them, use them to send messages, influence their testimony. And Judge Olson agreed. He ordered Jennifer to stay away from her children, away from their home, away from their school. And if she was released on bail, she was not to have any contact with them whatsoever. Jennifer wiped tears from her face as the order was read. But she didn't say a word, didn't argue, just nodded, because at that point, what could she say? Her children had lost their father, and now, because of her own actions, they'd lost their mother too. Jennifer's defense team tried multiple times to get her released on bail. They argued that she wasn't a flight risk, that she had ties to the community, that she deserved the chance to prepare for trial outside of jail. But every time the prosecution pushed back, and every time the judge denied bail. In a hearing in February of 2025, prosecutor Emily Paulos presented new evidence. She showed the court photos of the crime scene, the blood-stained carpet, the new mattress, the rug that had been in the bedroom, later found discarded in a dumpster. Paulos presented a side-by-side comparison, a photo from 2023 showing Matthew standing next to that same rug, and a photo from September 2024 showing the rug covered in blood, discarded like trash. Paulos also played portions of the recorded phone call between Jennifer and the informant. The courtroom went silent as Jennifer's voice filled the room. He wasn't a person anymore. He wasn't Matt anymore. People gasped. Some cried. Matthew's family sat in the front row, holding each other, listening to the woman he'd married describe him as less than human. And through it all, Jennifer sat stone-faced. No emotion, no tears, just nothing. Judge Adam Mao, who had been assigned to the case, denied bail once again. He ruled that Jennifer posed a significant risk to the community, that if released she would likely continue to obstruct the investigation, that the safety of the informant, the safety of the children, the integrity of the case, all depended on keeping her behind bars. And so, Jennifer Gledhill remained in the Salt Lake County Jail, awaiting trial, awaiting justice. The trial is scheduled to begin in December of 2025. Jury selection is set for December 8th. The trial itself is expected to last about a week, and when it finally happens, the world will hear the full story. The prosecution will present their case, the blood evidence, the GPS data, the testimony of the informant, the recording, the storage container, the new mattress, the cover-up, all of it, and the defense. They'll argue that it's all circumstantial, that without a body, without a weapon, the state can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Jennifer killed Matthew. They'll suggest alternative explanations, that maybe Matthew is still alive, that maybe someone else killed him, that maybe, just maybe, Jennifer is innocent. But here's what we know. Matthew Johnson has not contacted his children since September 21st, 2024. He has not contacted his family, his friends, his commanding officers. His phone has been off, his accounts untouched. For a man who dedicated his life to his family, to his country, to service, that silence speaks volumes. And the prosecution believes that silence is proof that Matthew Johnson is dead, and proof that Jennifer Gledhill killed him. As the case moves toward trial, Matthew's family continues to search for his body. They've organized volunteer search parties. They've hired private investigators. They've pleaded with the public for any information, anything that might lead them to Matthew. Because they don't just want justice, they want closure. They want to bring Matthew home. They want to give him a proper burial. And they want his children to have a place to visit, a place to remember their father. But so far, despite months of searching, despite hundreds of hours of effort, Matthew Johnson remains missing. His body, somewhere in the wilderness of Davis County, has not been found. And unless Jennifer decides to tell the truth, unless she leads investigators to the grave she dug, it may never be. Some cases haunt you because of the violence, some because of the cruelty. But this case haunts you because of the coldness, the calculation, the way Jennifer allegedly shot her husband while he slept, the way she allegedly stuffed his body into a storage container and buried him like he was nothing, the way she ordered a new mattress like she was replacing a piece of furniture, the way she cleaned up the blood and bleached the walls and went to her lover's house and told him what she'd done, and then walked into a police station days later and played the role of the concerned wife, worried, afraid, looking for her missing husband, when all along she knew exactly where he was, because she'd put him there. So I want to ask you, do you think Jennifer Gledhill is guilty? Do you believe the testimony of the informant? Do you think a jury will convict her without a body, or do you think the defense has a chance? And what about her parents? Do you think they knowingly helped her cover up a murder? Or were they just trying to protect their daughter, unaware of what she'd done? Let me know in the comments. I really want to hear your thoughts on this. Because this case isn't over. The trial is still months away. And when it happens, it's going to be one of the most closely watched cases in Utah history. A mother accused of murdering her husband. A National Guardsman who served his country, only to be allegedly killed by the woman he trusted most. 3 children who lost both parents in one horrific act. And a community that will never be the same. If this story affected you, if it made you think, made you feel something, There are more stories like this, stories about betrayal, about secrets, about the thin line between love and hate. Check out the next video because sometimes the most dangerous person is the one sleeping next to you. Thanks for watching The Only Witness, and remember, subscribe so you never miss the next one.